context. So a little bit about me. I'm an experienced secondary educator. I currently teach high school. I'm teaching AP African American Studies and World History. I'm also a curriculum writer with a passion for the holistic development of young people and an unwavering dedication to collaboration throughout the African diaspora. I've worked with various organizations to support specialized curriculum initiatives, including the Dr. Hugh P. Newton Foundation, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the National Women's History Museum, um, the National Museum of Women's History, and the Center for Black Educator Development. I also just have a demonstrated record of teaching and educational initiatives that are all related to African diasporic history, the Black radical tradition, culturally sustaining pedagogy, and decolonizing curriculum within the United States and also abroad. And if you wanted to follow any of my work or link to my website, that can be done on my Instagram page, which is at Education and Liberation. And there's my face. So our session agenda for today, we're going to do a quick warm up, and then I'm going to go over some of the grounding and rationale for this presentation, but also for the activities that I did with my students. So about learning with and from Afro-diasporic communities. We're going to do a little bit of a preview of Black Power in Britain documentary, and then we will give you some time in breakout groups to talk about or learn about Black resistance in the UK and create some digital storyboards. After that, we will talk about some contemporary Black movements and resistance movements that are happening throughout the UK and give you an opportunity to reflect on how you can implement this learning in your classroom. And there'll be some teacher resources for you as well. All right, so the warm up. So in the chat, you can consider one of these prompts. The first prompt, because different people have different relationship or information around Black British history. Most of us have experienced more so cultural expressions coming out of the UK and Black communities in the UK, but you can choose either one of these prompts. One thing that comes to mind when you think about Black British history, or one thing that comes to mind when you think about Black British culture. And I'll pause here and give us like 2 minutes.
I honestly don't know that much about Black British culture or history. So I'm really excited to kind of just be here and learn today and learn a lot more about it. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to add to the conversation at all, but I'm excited to learn about it. So thank you for having
Yay,
me.
well, we're glad you're here. And where are you logging in from?
Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota. Love that.
Thank
Anybody else want to share in the chat or? Oh no, I think that it might be just us. All right. Well, we will move on. So the grounding and the rationale, learning with and from Afro-diasporic communities. So in 2023, I crafted a self-directed fellowship through a Fund for Teachers grant to explore significant cultural and historical sites throughout London and other boroughs. And the goal of this was to document Black British history with an intentional focus on two things. One, cross-cultural connections with African Americans during the Black Power era, and then two, to gain insight into modern Black movements. A lot of this work also kind of stems from some of my personal explorations. I've been to London several times, so like I had a certain understanding of like Black British contemporary like culture and expressions and history, but I wanted to understand more context to what I was witnessing and what I was experiencing. And this fellowship was guided more so by my passion for elevating the histories of African descendant people, so that I'm really passionate about that as a Pan-Africanist and an educator. I'm really intent on making sure that we highlight the vastness of the African diaspora. So through my fellowship, some of the really kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Influential or significant moments were my Black History walking tours with Tony Warner. And I have links in the presentation slide so that you can actually go and do your own learning and experience some of these things. Oral archives at the Docklands Museum, the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton, and then the World Reimagined exhibition for Globes that were all dedicated to African diasporic histories and culture. The World Reimagined focused on the legacies of the Ma'afa, or the transatlantic slave trade, and I thought that that was a very impactful thing for me to witness. The implementation plan, so, and all of these are pictures from my fellowship, but the implementation plan, I knew that I wanted to implement this into my 2024 week of action with my students. Since 2022, my students have participated in the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action project, and each year we focus on a specific guiding principle. So I think like one year it was Black villages, another year it was I forget, like listen to Black women. So there have been different, I follow or I choose a guiding principle and apply it to that year. So 2024, the principal focus for my students was globalism. So we were highlighting the connected diversity of the African diaspora, as well as the intersecting history of Black radical movements and resistance. In that class, most of the students, I would say probably like 98% of the students in my class were of African descent. So I thought that it was important for them to see just how vast the African diaspora is and how interconnected it is. So it's like connected diversity because it is diverse. It's not a monolith, but it's all connected. This week exposed students to significant moments in Black British history and culture that they've rarely engaged with or never really considered. Just through popular media like Netflix or YouTube or just music, some of them do engage with Black British culture in a way. They may watch Top Boy on Netflix, they may listen to certain albums, and there are certain artists that they know of, but again, contextualizing the cultural expressions that they're witnessing. So the Week of Action activities help students to, one, explore the Black Power era in Britain. I'm not proclaiming that we covered all aspects of Black British history because I don't even know that, but we did focus in on something that I felt like they could connect to. They know the Black Power era, they know the Civil Rights Movement. So connecting to that and exploring what were the manifestations of these movements in the UK. They were able to make connections or it helped them make connections between Black movements in the US, analyze historical evidence of cross-cultural organization between Afro-diasporic communities in both nations, and then understand the lasting impact of these movements on cultural expression, pride, and contemporary movements. So we're going to do a little preview of this is a larger documentary and it's called Black Power in Britain. And I think the narrator is Daniel Kaluuya, the guy from Get Out and Nope and some other things. Yeah, so he actually narrates this documentary and it's quite good. Like I mean, obviously there's way more information in history to explore, but I think it's a really good point of departure for people who have no context for this history. So we're gonna, in a whole group, watch Black Power, A British Story of Resistance. I think it's about a 4-minute clip. And then you're gonna choose one of these questions to explore in the chat. So what resonates with you about this history? What do you find challenging about this history? Or what else would you like to learn about this history? And you can record your reflections in the chat and then review the reflections of other participants as they type. And I'm gonna share my screen.
The way
When I pressed play, could you hear? Perfect. Okay.
that I was first introduced to a actual organization of Black Power which I wanted to join was Alexandra Palace, where there was a large conference of all the radical organizations of Asians and Blacks. Althea Jones.
To us Black people, this feels.
She spoke very eloquently and she said she was from the Black Panther movement.
Althea Jones LeQuant came to England from Trinidad to study biochemistry at University College London. She was a fierce opponent of state-sponsored racism in Britain's former colonies and soon became leader of the Black Panther movement.
You know, the camera is there to protect and to help and to show. This is Althea. Althea is one of the most striking, strong, determined young women.
In spite of protests from large sections of the British population, your government is prepared to continue supporting the racism and repression that the South African regime represents. Our brothers and sisters in the townships in South Africa, our brothers and sisters who are fighting right now in Zimbabwe, are taking these words beyond...
I became a member of the Black Panther movement as a consequence of hearing Althea LeQuant Jones, the leader of the Black Panthers in Brixton, speak. She was bright, she was articulate, and I decided I wanted to go to meetings to find out more about this Black Panther movement.
This is what the sister is getting at. Our generation can't tolerate schools that only prepare us to do the menial tasks.
It was in southeast London. The organisation was called Black Unity and Freedom Party. There were predominantly young men, and at the meeting we had a speaker. It was like an awakening. And I just went back all full of excitement about what I had heard and seen, and invited my school friends to come with me the following week.
There were lots of us. It was a young movement of young men and women. There were the Fasimbas, there was the Black Liberation Front, Black Panthers. I came to join the Black Unity and Freedom Party because I was ready to join a movement.
We need more black symbols. Black Tories.
March 1970, I joined a Black Power organisation, the Fasimbas. I walked into the room and I saw a sea of black faces. The first time I'd experienced that. I was overwhelmed.
The best armor we have against the prejudice.
Listen to the speakers speak, say we've been exploited for centuries, now time for us to unite. He said, black power, black power, black power. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I found something I could belong to, something I could believe in.
It was black people standing up for the first time in a way that was extremely militant. It wasn't begging, it wasn't trying to show we were equal. It was saying we know we're equal and we're not putting up with it. That's the attraction for all of us. We were all part of a huge movement of belief. We were just part of a bigger black movement and wanted to, do what we had to do, demonstrate, demand.
All right, so let's see. Either in the chat or you can come off mute. Let me go backwards one slide. Oh, nope, there we go. What resonated with you about this history? What did you find challenging about this history, or what else do you want to learn? You can choose to answer any of them.
I just found it really interesting that there was a powerful woman figure at the center of the movement that was being shown, because that isn't as prevalent in American history.
Yeah, for sure.
Or
And
at
I
least
like
mainstream
how
American
she
history.
was kind of like the figure that brought some of them into the movement. And to hear the men say like, oh, I wanted to join the British Black Panthers because I heard her speak. And then I knew I wanted to be a part of this. Yeah. Anyone else, something that resonated with you or something that you find challenging or anything else you'd like to learn? Feel free to drop it in the chat or to come off mute.
I think what resonated with me was at the very beginning. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead. I'll wait.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Resonated with me was at the very beginning, you had the one man who was talking about how he heard the protests, or not the protests, he heard the people gathering in Alexander Square by Alexander Palace. I can't remember exactly which, but and he was talking about how it was filled with both Black people and Asian people, who are all kind of like communicating and coming together and trying to also be part of this movement, which I think is interesting because it speaks to just the colonialism of Britain, and I mean how they colonized everywhere. And I never thought about other people joining the Black Panther movement like that. I find it very interesting. I'm not saying it correctly, but I thought that was really interesting. That was something that I'd like to learn more about, I think.
For sure. And there's a concept also of like political Blackness. And one thing I will say without going on a tangent is that the Black Panther Party had a very large reach. So there was an Australian Black Panther Party or an Aboriginal Black Panther Party. There was a Dalit Black Panther Party in India, amongst people who were in that Dalit class. And there were a few other there was a Black Panther and Black Power movement in Vanuatu, which is in the Pacific. So like this concept of like Black power and like what the Panthers started in Oakland and how it reverberated around the world. Yeah, that resonates with me too. And then seeing how Southeast Asian folks in the UK resonated with this concept of political Blackness as well. Yeah. Anybody else want to share?
This is Vicky. I'm in my car, so sorry I can't be on camera, but there
Hey,
was no way I
Vicky.
was going to miss this. Hey, Ariel, I am so proud of you, but that's another thing. We will talk. You're not going to dodge me in 2025. But more in relation to what you just shared, having had the opportunity to do research in the UK myself and speaking with Black peers, Black British peers, whether they originally had immigrated to the UK from the African continent, whether they had come over from the Caribbean, hearing how there had been an effort for so long in the UK to present this idea that somehow race does not figure into the social challenges of their nation. And then doing the research myself, knowing that that could not possibly have been true, especially not based on the conversations I was having with friends and colleagues. And then finding this whole empowerment movement around the recognition of undermining and overthrowing British colonialism. It's always fascinating to me how cultures attempt to hide that these are things that need to be addressed. And it's something that they're still dealing with in the UK right now. This supposition that race, from the British perspective, the white British perspective, is a US thing. So countless times people would say to me, well, Vicky, yeah, we understand that you have that problem in the US, but we don't really have race issues in the UK. And clearly the history says the opposite.
Yes. Thank you, Vicky. That's a strong contribution. And I even myself, even when I was going through the hiring process to work at an international school in London, they were at first very excited because they wanted to do some anti-racism work and some other types of teaching. And then through the process, there was a comment made, and then obviously I ended up not working there, but there was a comment made by a higher up that she didn't feel like any of that was necessary, and that principal that, had been trying to hire me, that he was mistaken, that this is actually not, it's an American race, and racism is an American phenomenon. She said, and the concept of race and talking about racism has no place in Europe or in the British context. And that's really just an American thing. So yeah, I echo that sentiment that even people who are running school systems hold that belief very strongly, even as they're being racist in that moment. They will then say, there is no racism here. Okay, Liz said, I studied in London in 2016, and a lot of my professors made that comment as well, that racism wasn't really a thing here. Yeah. And it's so interesting because it's like, well, who were a lot of the pilgrims that came to Turtle Island here? Like, they, a lot of them were British. So it's like, it's funny how even these concepts were actually exported out of Europe into what we call the New World. And they don't take ownership for that. So yeah, definitely great contributions. So Black Resistance digital storyboards, this will be the part for us to be in breakout groups. And I know we're a smaller group, but I still wanted to offer this activity. So I've used storyboards in my classes before, and it's an easy way to highlight art integration in the classroom and to also help students process their learning. So I'll have students engage with some written text. Most recently, I had students read an article about feudalism in Japan and the code of Bushido and samurai. And then after they engaged with the text and answered the text-dependent questions, they then turned those answers and those key points that they found in the literature into a storyboard. So in assigned breakout groups, and this is something that we can do, or we don't have to offer that much time for it, but I do want to still offer it as an option. You're going to explore and discuss the provided learning source related to Black British history. So group 1 will explore the Bristol bus boycott. Group 2, British Black Panther Party. Group 3, Mangrove 9 trial. And then within your groups, you're going to identify 4 significant takeaways or moments within the source you explored. As a group, you'll claim one of the storyboard templates that's in this slide deck. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to a slide deck that has these directions and also 3 storyboards, one for each group. And you're going to create a storyboard with at least 4 panels to illustrate the key takeaways from this history. So each panel must have a short summary, short summaries about each takeaway. So, for example, if I was doing feudal Japan, maybe my first panel will say, the emperor lost his power in the 1800s. I just made that part up, I think. Maybe that is the summary sentence. And then I would go find a relevant visual that connects to what I just said. So maybe a picture of the emperor at that time in Japan. And groups can use internet searches to find visuals. And I've done this with students by hand before, where I've had them draw their visuals, and a lot of them really got into it. And then I've also had where they go find images that connect to what they have read. So my plan was to give us 10 minutes for the digital storyboards. I am open to you engaging with this activity in a way that you find best. So if you just want to explore one of these articles and read them, great. Or if you want to actually get into making one of the storyboards inside of the storyboard templates deck, that is cool as well. All right. Does anybody want to share either four key takeaways or maybe one key takeaway from the article that you explored? Does anybody want to share a key takeaway, maybe one or two key takeaways from the article you explored?
I read the Mangrove 9 article.
Yeah.
And really, really things I never heard of it, really fascinating. So the Mangrove 9 was the Mangrove was a restaurant in Notting Hill in London. It was owned by Frank Crinchlow, I think is how I say the last name. And he was a Trinidad activist in London. And the police were harassing the area. The article didn't necessarily like say that it was because he was an activist, but that would be my kind of guess assumption. Um, but the restaurant was the heart of the community, Caribbean community. It was being harassed by the police, and then activists like Barbara Bees, Althea Jones, and several other members were kind of protesting or led a protest march against the police, and the police arrested them for protesting. There was a trial that was held, and during the trial, the what was it? The director of public prosecutions would not let them reinstate the clause of having a jury of your peers because the activists were asking to be tried by fellow Black people as opposed to having an all white jury, and that was not allowed. And they only had, I think, 2 Black people that served on the 12-person jury. But it did end on the 5th day of the trial, and they were all acquitted of their of protesting and stuff. But this actually led to the judge acknowledging that there was racial hatred on the British police side, and this was kind of a stepping stone in trying to get not less, it was a stepping stone in the right direction of kind of racial discrimination from the police, from London police, at least from my very, very brief reading of it. This is not fully
Yeah,
cohesive.
for sure. No, you did a great job. If anyone has seen Small Axes, which is like I don't want to call it an anthology, but it's a film. It's a series of small films done by, his name is escaping me. I think it's Steve McQueen. I think, yeah. And it's a series of small films and about Black British history and experiences. And there is an episode in there that's about the Mangrove 9 trial. And it's really interesting. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the next portion, but these articles are really good points of departure for students. And I personally really like the storyboard concept because I think it allows kids to process their reading. I've also had them answer questions on an article before and then make their answers the summary statements for each of the panels. So if there are 5 questions, put each of your answers as the summary statement or caption for each panel in the storyboard, and then go find an image that relates or draw an image that explains the answer to your question. So I just think this is a really good thinking routine. All right, so now we're getting to our last part, which is about contemporary movements. As a culminating activity for the Week of Action in 2024, students learned about contemporary Black movements within the UK that demand greater inclusion for Black histories in the national curriculum, which, ha ha ha, that sounds familiar because that's exactly the types of things that are happening here. So the students were able to be like, oh, they're trying to get more Black history in their curriculum. We're trying to get more Black history in our curriculum. So they could see those connections. In this, we explored the work of community leaders such as Lavinia Stennett at the Black Curriculum, and I've linked her organization there, and Lawrence Hu and Chaz Golding at the Cargo Movement. After exploring these two community initiatives or community-led initiatives, students participated in 2 virtual sessions with Lawrence and Chaz to learn more about education in the UK. And the students were able to pilot a few lessons from the Cargo classroom site, which was really exciting. And I was very glad that they were able to give their time. And of course, with the time difference, but they still stayed up late and then joined my students in class. So we're gonna show this very brief clip from the Cargo Movement, and I'm not gonna show the whole thing in the interest of time, but I do want you to see a little bit about what the Cargo Movement does because they do really important work. Can you hear?
So I thought that because to me, our history kind of started when we came here, when my parents came here. But then it goes back further than that, which is I'm starting to realise and know about that. But we didn't do a lot on Black history when I was at school.
There wasn't much of Black history that I can remember being taught.
I learned from my community more than it was in school.
I think it's really important, but it's not taught.
I don't think I've really heard much before Nelson Mandela or anyone like that. Those people's been like the only people's been taught, and Black slavery is morely the negative sides. It's not the positives and the good things that we need to understand the truth of our community.
And they really didn't show the other side of it, more just Europe's. And I didn't learn about these important people that actually fought for their land. And I think that's really important. They need to teach that. And it just wasn't taught.
But there's other things that I know that I didn't find out till way after I left school that could have helped me.
It would have given me a sense of more purpose, like to be kind of proud. I grew up thinking we just have to get through, you know, and get to a stage where I can get a job. Then that was it. Didn't really have a dream, you know, because you weren't really given that opportunity to have a dream. Do you know what I mean?
I'd be a more confident person than myself, knowing who I am.
Disempowered, like, you know, they're not showing the truth. It's hidden.
I could have been more motivated or find more inspiration. I see things differently now. And I had to wait till I got older to see this stuff. Like I would have loved to see it when I was younger, but because I had to get older, things change and part of my mind's already been shaped. When you're finding out new things, especially stuff that we didn't learn in school, I feel like it's reshaping my mind to the truth, to what's actually the truth that's actually out there, and then the truth that we've just been taught.
And we're slowly staggering with it at the moment, trying to find it ourselves, and that's because it was lacked in that curriculum, I guess.
I've been taught about Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, and I've been taught a lot about.
Sorry. So I'll stop it there and we'll go forward. Oops, nope. Okay. So another thing that's interesting, and I've heard some other people say this before, like when I'm engaging with Black communities in the UK, is that there's also this concept of offshoring history. So sometimes pretending as if there is no Black history within Britain or within the UK, but there is elsewhere. So like, sure, you can learn about Martin Luther King Jr., but there's no Black activist heroes or like influential figures here. So kind of offshoring the blame for slavery, like, oh, well, there were no plantations here in London. It's like, yeah, but there were plantations elsewhere where the British like colonized, right? Or, oh, there were no like large, I don't know, assassinations of political leaders here. So just learn about, and it's like, but these things actually did occur here. So there's like whitewashing history, but there's also offshoring history and making all of the things that occurred just happen somewhere else. So the children and just Black communities in general feel very disconnected from it. So the cargo movement was founded in 2016, and it stands for Charting African Resilience, Generating Opportunities. And again, my students were able to have 2 webinars with Chaz and Lawrence, and it was really great. The cargo movement illuminates the contributions and achievements of people of African and African diasporic heritage through poetry, illustrations, art installations, videos, educational resources, telling the stories of people who have catalyzed, changed, and moved humanity forward. So the Cargo Classroom's main aim is to enhance and broaden the national curriculum in response to the opportunities to celebrate African and African diasporic leadership through key milestones and contributions that have been made, inequalities in cultural engagement statistics and representation in education worldwide, and a will to highlight the global relevance of African and African diasporic histories. And their work is amazing. I've collaborated with them in some other ways. I've done some interviews or interview series for them before, so I'm on their Instagram page. Like, I just love the work they do, and I think that it's just really important. So, as a closure, I do have some teacher resources for you to explore. So, Cargo Classroom has an interactive digital lessons platform, and all of the artwork that you see on the screen right now, these are illustrations that are from the Cargo Classroom lessons. So, one thing that I really like about the Cargo Classroom lessons is that the multimedia aspect is like dialed all the way up. Like just the way the posters, and I have some of these posters in my classroom right now, but the artwork is very intentional. It's very dynamic. The graphics that are inside of the digital lessons are very dynamic. And if you click on the link to interactive digital lessons, it'll take you to the Cargo Classroom platform. You can see their rationale for why they exist. There are some free downloads. So there are curriculum materials that go with each of these lessons. And then there's also a digital version of the lesson. And my students actually got to engage with the digital versions of 2 of the lessons. They did a lesson on Henrietta Lacks, which I think might be posted on there. I can't remember if we were piloting that or if they posted it. And then my students got to choose any of the other posted lessons to engage in. And they found, and then give feedback. So that was great. And then also, Cargo Classroom has a free online course called Practical Skills for Teaching Inclusive History with Cargo Classroom. And it explores ways to improve the representation of people of African and African diasporic heritage, drawing on 5,000 years of history. So, you can even see in the first row, they have a picture of, or a artistic expression of Imhotep. So like they go all the way back to like the ancient world and then bring it all the way up to the contemporary. So I think there's a wide range of lessons here that cover a great deal of history and incorporate just how vast the diaspora is. And then lastly, you can always follow them on social media. On Instagram, they're at Cargo Movement. And while you take the last, let me look at my timer, the last 5 minutes to explore some of the Cargo Classroom digital lessons and offerings, consider how you can improve the inclusion of the African diaspora in your classroom or in your personal learning. Any closing reflections about the resource exploration that you did, or any ways that you can improve the inclusion of African diasporic history in your classroom or personal learning?
So Ariel, you and I have had an opportunity to speak about the work that I'm doing, and
Yeah.
part of building a global teacher repository to support culturally responsive instruction in the classroom is around developing access to tools that teachers can then go to. Because one of the concerns that I hear when I do training is, well, if I don't know, how do I know? And we understand that there's an onus for self-informing, but when we're talking about serving children, for me, I want to make sure that the tools are there so that the children are being supported. So this is a phenomenal tool that I plan to add to what I've been sharing, because I can see so many ways for it to enrich the classroom I currently work in, but also enriching the work that's being done for children in other regions of the world.
Absolutely. And you do such great work already. So thank you for your work. And then, yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, there are a few people at my school who've been asking me, how can I do this? How can I do that? I'm like, oh, they could take this free online course that is being offered or look at these digital resources. So yeah, I agree. Anything else? Any other things to share? Liz, any thoughts?
Um, I was looking at the cargo site, just kind of going through some of the lessons and stuff there, but I think there's a lot of really just really informational things that I'd like to pass along to some of my students and stuff. I'm an English teacher, so I'm able to kind of um work in things as like I can tie them into whatever we're teaching and stuff. I have to look at what we're doing for curriculum for next semester, but I think I might try to sneak in some of these um lessons into our like either war opportunity or something, so that there's a lot of good stuff that my kids could take from this. So I'm excited to do a little more research and digging into it.
Absolutely. I remember when I was teaching US history. Oh, and then I'll stop talking because it's 1:50, but I used some of their information about Marcus Garvey when we were talking about the 1920s. So yeah, I agree with you. Like, so I even had my students pick a lesson and then just explore it on their own as I could do now. Like click through the lesson online, and then I gave them a tracker to like kind of jot down their thoughts. So I didn't make it an arduous task, but like something that they can really like engage in and say like, great, you learned about Marcus Garvey in this like activity we did. Now we're going to learn about him and the larger context of the Harlem Renaissance. So thank you guys so much for sharing space with me today. This is actually a cargo classroom billboard that's in Bristol. So you can see they're making a really big impact. And I'm just glad that I've been able to be in community with them and then share this with my students as well. So thank you for joining me. And I forget what the next session is, but I think it's a resource share. So I will see you all over there.